past me with lived experience of living in learning disability services. So I lived in learning disability autism services myself for 11 years before taking on this role. So self-advocacy, let's talk about self-advocacy. We believe it's the best form of advocacy. If you can speak for yourself, you can prevent situations happening later on. And that's why I call it personally the ultimate preventative service. You hear this a lot in Welsh Government legislation and in grants, preventative services. If you can speak for yourself and you can have control and have power, you can stop things before they get to a more severe level. And then for complicated things, then fine, advocacy is great for that. But where you can speak for yourselves, the little things like where you want to live, what your aspirations for the future are, that should be self-advocacy, not advocacy. Knowing your rights individually. So we need our members, we try to get our members to understand their rights, culturally understanding they're allowed a point of view and they're allowed to speak up for their rights, because a lot of people with learning disabilities are still probably used to being subservient to people without learning disabilities. And we work together for political change. We're meant to be a political activist organisation as well, a human rights organisation and what have you. And I often use this analogy. When you think about people first, and we use the term self-advocacy within the learning disability world, actually self-advocacy is not new. It's just taken us longer to get around to doing it for people with learning disabilities. Everybody in this room here today have the rights they've got because of a self-advocate. So yeah, if you look at the picture in the middle, men make the Emmeline Pankhurst. That's a brilliant example of that. Men make the moral code and they expect women to accept it. They have decided that it is entirely right and proper for men to fight for their liberties and their rights, but that it is not right and proper for women to fight for theirs. So obviously you will all know about the suffragette movement. But what was really interesting about the suffragette movement, and I think this is what we've learned, what I've learned anyway, very clearly about our fight, is, as you know, in the First World War, the suffragettes stopped their campaigning to help with the war effort. The men went to fight in World War I, and the women worked in the munitions factories, they drove the buses, they did all the jobs that people said a woman could never do. And what did they do by doing that? They changed attitudes. They changed attitudes by being visible, present, and doing. Women got the vote for 31 years and under, still not equal to 18, but it was a start. And eventually women get the vote. And this is what I think we have to do within self-advocacy for people with learning disabilities. We need people visible, we need people present, we need them in employment, we need them in society. That's how you change attitudes towards learning disability, but it will take a long, long time to do it. Bottom left hand, nobody ever gets the bottom left hand picture. That's John Frost, basically, the Chartist riots, the Chartist movement, and there was the riots in Newport. But people like John Frost basically got the working class man the vote. So basically what we're doing is just learning from history, and it's taken us longer to get around to doing it with people with learning disabilities, but there's nothing new in it, really, when you look at it like that. So the challenges that our members face, I haven't seen all of Sam's presentation, so she might have covered some things. But for me, being seen as adults, it's really interesting. If we're going to get people to look our members in the eye and not the support workers or anybody else, they have to be seen as adults in the first place. And it's amazing how many people, how many members will go to, say, McDonald's and will be asked if they want a children's meal because they've got Down syndrome or Williams syndrome. And immediately there's this perception, it's coming from a good place, but there's this perception of somebody not being a full adult, not having, meaningful lives. You know, people with learning disabilities, I know when I turned 18, it was like I was effectively retired. There was, you know, you were finished. You were going to be in services, you were going to be in day centres. And that's, I'm not anti them per se, they might have a role, but the problem is some people stay there and they never leave them. And there's no meaningful life, there's no purpose. Employment is just an example. It doesn't have to be paid employment, it could just be a purpose, just being part of the community. People with learning disabilities are more likely to be economically disadvantaged because they're less likely to have a paid job. Simple as that. If you're less likely to have a paid job, you are going to be less likely to have a car and to be able to get out about. You're going to be less likely to live in a safer area in your community. It's all connected. And a lot of people suffer from isolation and loneliness. Um, yeah, I mean, some people in our groups, for instance, if it wasn't for the local groups, would have really, really struggled during COVID-19. And one or two people actually died during the pandemic. People that we lost contact with, unfortunately died because of the lack of social connectivity. So that's something we want to change by getting that citizenship. So the challenges members face. This is a great picture. This is from our Through Our Eyes project. Sam was talking about parents with a learning disability, and here's an example of a parent with a learning disability in Carmarthenshire. And they're not many people with learning disabilities end up keeping their children, as I'm sure Sam has already explained. But it's really, really lovely to see this as an example of a parent who has. So parenthood, which Sam's talked about, low aspirations. Society doesn't have many aspirations for people with learning disabilities. That's what was really, really upsetting about the whole PIP, the PIP benefits thing, because it was very much about saying to society and disabled people, get off your backside and get into work. But people with learning disabilities weren't wanted in the workplace. You know, it's not because they didn't want to work, it's because nobody wanted them, that they were forced on benefits. And then all of a sudden, you start to then see this kind of demonization of disabled people generally. But for people with learning disabilities, everything that the government was talking about in terms of it's better for yourself, it's better if you can work your way out of poverty. Our members would rip your arms out in most cases to work themselves out of poverty, but they've never had the chance or the opportunity. Health inequalities, as I'm sure you know, I don't need to tell you because of the nature of the work you guys do, but you know, people with learning disabilities suffer a lot of health inequalities, more likely to die than their peers who don't have learning disabilities. That's an ongoing thing. Annual health checks and all of this, which are really important, aren't happening as often as they could or should. A lot of that's to do with the burden and the strain society's under right now, economically. Restrictive practices. I won't go too much into that, but as you know, there are people with learning disabilities who are still being restrained in unnecessary and inappropriate ways. Worst case scenarios that can lead to deaths. Yeah, and a lack of understanding often of the Mental Capacity Act as well, which leads to this. So that's still an ongoing challenge. Transport. I mean, I'm sure nobody has a great time with transport right now, but some of our members and people with learning disabilities across Wales, because of basically the local authorities have had to check everybody who has bus passes are still entitled to get them. And in doing so, this is a very simple version of the story. In doing so, that they're kind of falling into the PIP criteria, which people with learning disabilities don't really score high on. And a lot of our members, even though their bus passes in some cases weren't due to expire until 10 years' time, a lot of our members lost their bus passes and had their bus passes taken away from them. And they're still fighting to get them now. So, you know, when I was talking before about isolation and loneliness, you've got some people with learning disabilities who aren't even able to go out whilst this is going on. They've got to use their benefit money. If they need a support worker, they've got to pay for them. So they can't go out as often as they could. Even things like street lighting, which has been switched off earlier to save money, means they don't feel as safe at night to go out in their community. So these are real issues for the people we represent. So how do we work to affect change? It's, you know, there's multi-pronged approaches. This on our right, you can find on our website, is our manifesto. And I'm going to go through some of the main parts of our manifesto as well. So that's our Victory for Self-Advocacy sign. And make sure you get that one the right way around. Sharing our members' stories, quite simply, whenever our members experience something or whenever there's an issue going on, whether that's with the bus passes or anything else, member stories are really strong and really are important. And we make sure we connect our member stories to our policies and our consultation responses, which I'll come on to in a bit. The political manifesto, round about the time of every Welsh Government election, we produce a manifesto, which we tell the Welsh Government what's important to us and what changes we'd like to see. It also gives all Wales People First a blueprint of some of the things they need to prioritise as an organisation to affect the changes for our members. AdFest, one of my bugbears is conferences where, and you see this a lot in the sector, you'll see a conference where we talk about the same 5 or 6 things every year and they get rotated. We'll have a working group which will say things like, what 3 things would you change? Then at the end, the chief exec will get up and give an overview and we'll set up a working group and nothing changes, and we do it every year. And it seems to be this way of, for me, the sector just justifying this existence of talking about things we've talked about a million times before. So when self-advocacy is facing some of its toughest times, I thought about this idea of having a festival where instead of people coming to me as the chief executive of All Wales People First, we say to the sector, you want to know what people with learning disabilities think about health, transport, whatever. Don't ask me, come to AdFest, ask the members, have a stall, come and speak to self-advocates because they'll tell you. So we want it to be a main focal point for people who want to engage with people with learning disabilities to do things better. Come to AdFest, speak to real people with learning disabilities and find out what you need to know. And at the same time, we hope we make the case for the importance of self-advocacy in doing so. I'll come on to that a little bit later on. We've introduced a thing called regional councils. Now, the idea of regional councils was to help local groups. I'll come on to this a bit more later on, but there's been a crisis in advocacy generally. Self-advocacy has been part of that crisis. And what happened is, this is complicated, but in the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act, Part 10 advocacy, Section 7B refers to self-advocacy and other advocacy just as other forms of advocacy. It's as straightforward as that, which means it's fallen off the radar compared to advocacy, so one-to-one paid advocacy. Although one-to-one paid advocacy is not having an easy time either. When money's tight, one-to-one paid general advocacy has been prioritised. The idea of regional councils was to put our groups together in clusters in the north, the west, the south and the east to work with regional partnership boards to co-design services, to make sure they're preventative, to make sure we get them right for the first time of asking, and again at the same time make the case for this thing we call self-advocacy. Unfortunately, that hasn't really worked very well because COVID-19 came. Regional partnership board meetings weren't really happening in quite the way they were envisaged. And I don't think RPBs have had a really strong representation in the way they could have done. So, but we have done good work in North Wales with the North Wales Flyers in terms of doing some co-production there of services. So we have some models there. We have helped in every region in some way, but it wasn't able to have been delivered in the way it was initially envisaged because of those other barriers, especially COVID. We have a national council, as I mentioned before. So we're a strange organisation, really, because we have effectively two boards. So years ago, we had a management committee. People with learning disabilities on that said they didn't want to manage the finances and what have you. So we split the management committee into a national council, which is made of members who set the political and strategic priorities of the organisation. And we have a board of directors who look after the finances, the employment issues in the organisation. But the National Council sign off everything. They sign off the manifesto, they sign off position statements, our business plan, everything, and they hold me to account. We have member engagement forums where we have groups of people with learning disabilities who've worked with the NHS, who've worked with the criminal justice system, just on issues about co-designing processes, co-producing ideas, looking at materials, working in co-production really to design things that ensure we get it right the first time, using that genuine member voice. The thing about engaging with people with learning disabilities is it does take a bit more time, and it does take a bit more effort, but you are more likely to get it right the first time if you work with somebody right from the beginning. There's no point realizing you've got the problems later. A person with a learning disability are brilliant at actually telling you what will work straight away and what won't work. Campaigning and lobbying. I mean, we do this in lots of ways. Sometimes it's as straightforward as just writing a letter. Um, Sometimes it's about a petition. We did one petition to the Senate. We had a human rights challenge during COVID in one instance where members, one of the members, every time they left their care service, they had to stay in for 2 weeks permanently in their room and not see anyone. And if after 3 or 4 days they left, the 2 weeks started again, which was not proportionate to legislation. So thanks to, to human rights legislation and the COVID legislation. So thanks to support from the British Institute of Human Rights, we were able to make a human rights case challenge on that and get that overturned. Because what we find is that often people are ignorant to human rights. It's not that anybody wishes to deprive anybody of their human rights, but sometimes just pointing out human rights challenges or human rights gaps in itself can make a big difference. So campaigning, lobbying, we work with the Learning Disability Consortium as well. So that's Learning Disability Wales, Mencap Cymru, Always Forum of Parents and Carers, the Down Syndrome Association and Cartefi Cymru. And we work together then as well to do joint campaigns and lobbying as well about big issues. We fill in consultation responses. I don't know what good they do, quite frankly, because I think sometimes the decisions are already made before the consultation goes out. But you've got to say something. If you say nothing, nothing happens. So you've got to try. But our consultation responses are in line with our position statements. So if anybody is interested in the point of view of a person with a learning disability on any given issue, check out our website. We have organizational position statements, which are designed by the members of the National Council, and they in turn inform our policy responses. I'm a little bit ahead of time here. I just want to raise your attention to the Through Our Eyes photography project we have. It's over, it's finished, it's launched at the Senate. But from this, we produced a range of materials, which are largely photographs and memes that people with learning disability, third sector organisations can download and use in their materials and in their publications. So it's free. You just got to sign a consent form and follow the guidelines. But the reason we had this project is, again, this citizenship, including people in society. There are so many times when people with learning disabilities are represented by corny photographs designed by people who don't have learning disabilities. And, you know, the idea of the project is we say to people with learning disabilities, how would you like to be seen? And it always occurred to me, why can't a person with a learning disability just be seen in a dignified way, just looking at a camera, having a picture taken? You know, why do we always have to have what I call the thumbs up things, or a support worker with an arm around them saying we are just equals when they're not equals? There's no way they would be friends outside of that sector. So it's just nice to bring your attention to that, because these are images selected and taken through the project. So please use them if you can. So the challenges we face, this is the last bit. Yeah, in Wales years ago, we had a thing called the Advocacy Grant Scheme, and that basically funded a lot of the self-advocacy groups to establish and keep going. And that gave us the network of self-advocacy groups we have now. One of the problems is that with the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act, as I told you before, Part 7B, it doesn't really give self-advocacy much of a mention. But also as a result of that, there's a thing called independent professional advocacy contracts. And the IPA contracts, again, has a larger leaning towards formal advocacy rather than self-advocacy. And a lot of local authorities haven't understood this. And it's meant that self-advocacy has really suffered because of it. And we're powerless to do a lot about it, because if we tell the local authorities that they have a duty, they're pretty much able to, it's so woolly, the information, that they're able to either not have to do it or get around it. And of course, Welsh Government won't get involved in local situations, or won't challenge local authorities. So we are really worried that the self-advocacy movement in Wales is under real threat because of that. And I think this is probably, I don't know whether I'm barking up the wrong tree here, but I know the question asked earlier about parent advocacy, and I think this is probably where parent advocacy maybe sometimes suffers sometimes as well, because of that lack of distinction. Local authorities, as you know, have got COVID-19 recovery. They're under massive financial pressures and burdens again. They're looking to make cuts. You've only got to switch on the news to see that local authorities are now talking about only delivering what they legally have to because of the strain they're under. And as you can imagine, things like self-advocacy and what have you are going to be really, really under pressure, especially if the NHS and the policing and everything and things like that are going to be hit. It's no wonder that we're going to have these problems. Local authority cuts generally. So I'll leave that there and just say thanks for listening. That is a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but obviously I can answer questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, Joe. Any questions there for Joe at all? Really insightful. The list of all the organisations under your umbrella then on your website and things, yeah, so we can go there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and definitely want to look at through our eyes project. We've done some work back in 2019 to develop the screening tools to make them into plain English and much more simple to use. But yeah, the images that we were offered weren't so great. So we're going to have a look at those. Maybe we'll need to replace them.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. Like I said, they're all free. They're free to download.
No, that's great. That's great. Okay. If we have no questions here for Joe, we've got another 15 minutes or so now of question and answers. So what we're going to do, Helen has told me she's worked her magic and you should disappear into little breakout rooms because it might be easier just to talk in smaller groups. To think about what we've covered today, some reflections, what you're going to take back into practice, and that sort of thing, and then we'll bring you back. I think it's going to be in like 5-7 minutes or so, and then we can maybe just, if your groups could just talk or share one or 2 points, that'd be great. Yeah, so
okay, I've not created breakout rooms for a while, so if you don't appear in a breakout room, bear with me and I will manually move you into a room, or I'll do my best endeavours anyway to move you. So you should be moving now, okay? Jan, I'm just moving you now.
oh, who's been left in ether then?
We
It's
are.
me.
Emma,
Me.
Kim, Jan.
I was in room 7 and then I
Oh, on my screen it was saying you weren't assigned, so I was moving you. So we've got Emma, Kim, Emma and Kim I need to move as well.
And Jan, is it? Hi Emma, you okay?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you, Sharon?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Oh, good. Oh, right. I've got a notification here to join, so I'm going to join the room now. Hold on.
Oh.
Okay.
Kim and Sarah.
Kim and Sarah still on our screen.
God, that's a skill I'm never gonna get to grips with.
Yeah, I always struggle with it as well.
I think it's one of those things, the more regularly you do it, you remember, but when you haven't done it for a while, it's remembering how to do it. But
Well, I do the automatic and it should just shuffle people into them,
Yeah.
but for some reason I'm getting a
oh,
couple
Ellen
that
has come
Oh.
back.
Hello, I'm back. I was
Hello.
trying to chat. I need to leave to do a birth visit, so I'm really sorry, guys, but it's been excellent today. Really good.
Okay, it's good to see you,
And I
Thank
particularly
you.
enjoyed Joe at the end there. I thought it was so good. Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you,
lovely.
guys.
Good. Okay,
Bye,
take care.
Ines.
Take care.
Bye.
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 What's happened to Kim then? We lost Kim in the ether?
Kim is still
Yeah.
showing us with us, which is a little bit. No, Kim is showing us she should be in room 6. I don't know why
Oh.
she's not gone there.
Yes, she has, but she wouldn't. Yeah, it's funny. She's showing up, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know why she's showing on ours because she should be in room 6. So,
Do they
So
have to
this
press
is-
something to go into a room?
no, they should
No.
just get a pop up, and it just takes them into it. So I've timed that for 7 minutes, or we can close the room earlier. But other than that, it'll automatically,
Bring him back.
yeah, bring people back. Oh,
Oh,
there we
Kim's
are.
gone now.
me
She's
just
going
stop.
to. She's going away, isn't she? I think she's going to Nepal this week sometime.
Is she?